council to order.
Begin with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pray with me. Father, I thank you so much for this community. Thank you for the things going on in it, and I ask that you'll be with those selected to make decisions and to lead us, and that you will give them unity and wisdom as they do so. I ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, roll call. Councilwoman Kern is absent, but we have a quorum and we'll proceed with business this evening. First on that agenda, or first business on that agenda, is approval of the agenda. Any council member have any questions on tonight's agenda or any additional business to add to it?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda approved. Citizen comments? Everyone here is on the agenda, so we will proceed along with it. First up is the approval of our consent agenda, which includes the minutes of our September 16th meeting and appropriation ordinance 1277.
I'm making the motion to approve the agenda, or the consent agenda, sorry.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approved. We do have a proclamation this evening. It is Public Power Week again, from October 6th to October 12th. So I will go ahead and make that proclamation. Whereas we, the citizens of Greensburg, Kansas, place high value on local choice over community services and therefore have chosen to operate a community-owned, not-for-profit electric utility, and as customers and owners of our electric utility, have a direct say in utility operations and policies. Whereas Greensburg's electric utility provides our homes, businesses, schools, and social services and local government agencies with reliable, efficient, and safe electricity, employing sound business practices designed to ensure the best possible service at not-for-profit rates. Whereas Greensburg's electric utility is a valuable community asset that contributes to the well-being of local citizens through energy efficiency, customer service, environmental protection, economic development, and safety awareness. Whereas Greensburg's electric utility is a dependable and trustworthy institution whose local operation provides many consumer protections and continues to make our community a better place to live and work and contributes to the protecting the global environment. Now therefore be it resolved that Greensburg's electric utility will continue to work to bring low-cost, safe, reliable electricity to community homes and businesses just as it has for many years to serve all the citizens of Greensburg, and be it further resolved that the week of October 6th through 12th be designated Public Power Week to recognize Greensburg's electric utility for its contributions to the community and to educate customer owners, policymakers, and employees on the benefits of public power. Be it further resolved that our community joins hands with the more than 2,000 other public power systems in the United States in celebration of public power, which puts our residents, businesses, and the community before profits. All right. With that, let's move on to our items of business tonight. We've got three, and first up is a continuation of something we discussed for about a month or so, and that is the haying lease agreement for our airport.
I've included that in your packet for consideration. The change since the last meeting is item number 8 that allows for either party to terminate the lease by giving 90 days notice in writing. And Clayton did review that and was comfortable with adding that in there. Last week, Mick and I met with Andrew out of the airport to kind of talk about where he would be haying, where we would need to go back in and clean up, just to make sure that we're on the same page so that the airport continues to look good and is well maintained. So with that, I'll just open it up to further questions and discussion. I did ask Andrew to be here, that way he could directly answer any questions and I wouldn't have to speak on his behalf and put words in his mouth, so, I'll just open it up to discussion.
Well, council discussion, again, really the principal change from the last time we looked at it was just the addition of that clause that allows either party to terminate the lease for any reason with sufficient notice. Any thoughts on the lease as presented?
If we looked at it that it's in the shape now, and Mr. McCloskey determined that it was not of the right height for him to benefit anything from it, then what do we do at that time?
I guess if the council thought that it needed to be
So
bailed.
we contact him, so you just go
Yeah.
ahead and do it,
Yeah,
okay?
I mean, that's how I read the lease,
I mean, that's the way the contract states.
yeah. And I guess if he felt like it didn't, that would probably become a cause for termination of the lease, you know, by either party if we could not come to an agreement for either of us, yeah.
What's your schedule look like for the way it looks now?
We're gonna try and swap it on Monday next week in Baylor. And then that should be taken care of for the year, I would imagine. We are gonna try and donate this cutting to the flood fund in the Carolinas. If I can get a truck lined out, that's what we're gonna do. So.
I'm guessing during your on-site meeting, it was more about the culverts and the close proximity stuff that's
Yeah,
unbailable.
along
or-
the ditch where now the electric line is, the soon-to-be water and sewer line, those sorts of things, some of the outlining kind of border areas or low-lying that he wasn't able to get to, so. Just to make sure that we're on the same page of who's getting what.
Mhm.
I have seen deer out in it the last 3 weeks.
Oh, good.
So
In the
it-
livestock.
Like I told you last week, it's perfect deer habitat.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. I'd like to see an airplane that has brakes and a anti-swerve deal. So,
Technology.
Hmm.
Technology.
Touch and go,
Yeah, there you go.
touch and go landing, yeah.
Well, council, we've discussed this for a while. Any action as on the lease as presented? We want to look at making any more changes. We do have some time to do that. Or are you ready to decide on this one way or the other tonight?
I move that we approve the lease as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the hang lease agreement for the airport as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Lease is approved. All right. Thanks for your time.
You bet, thank you guys.
Yep.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
You as well. And we will move on to our next item of business. Another continuation of something that's been discussed in recent meetings, but discussion on zoning regulations, specifically related to the hunting lodges out a couple blocks away.
Yes, since the public comment that was given on September 3rd, Christy and I have been looking into our zoning regulations regarding that block in particular and the concerns that were raised. I've included in the packet for discussion purposes our city zoning map. That block is in the R1A residential zoning district. And then I've included excerpts from our land development code that pertain to this discussion, specifically around bed and breakfasts, because that's really the only thing that is a similar use that is called out in our zoning code. Since the meeting, Christy and I have had several conversations about this and just trying to understand a little bit of the history of how that development came to be. And I think, bottom line, the first thing I would say is there's a lot of things that, property transactions that happen in the community that we may not know of until later, especially things that don't require a building permit or anything like that, or there's some awareness a lot of times that people don't know that they need to come get permits or come see about zoning regulations, things like that. So a lot of times, property acquisitions happen, a business or some other use starts in there, and then we hear about it after the fact. And I think that this is a great case of that, this business came in and started operating with one house, and then it grew from there. And by our interpretation of the zoning code is that at some point they probably should have needed to come to the planning commission for conditional use. And that didn't happen. And we think it's probably just a case of, it was an after the fact sort of thing that city staff became aware of what was happening with the use. And to be honest, it really puts city employees in a tough spot to say, you've spent however much money on this investment and now we gotta shut you down. That puts the city in a pretty uncomfortable spot, and I think you would agree with that too, because you'd probably hear about it as well. So tonight, just to have that discussion, following the conversation from the citizen comments, one other thing I would say is some of the other things, concerns that were brought up, like noise, dogs barking, parking, things like that, that could all be addressed within our ordinances in a different way if reports are made to law enforcement, that those sorts of things could be handled that route through ordinance violations, not necessarily zoning code issues. So really there's kind of two different things. So Christy, I'll see if I missed anything and turn it over to you, and then we can have that discussion.
I think you basically have covered most of what we kind of arrived at. With the zoning code, obviously you can't list every type of business, so what they've done, and is pretty normal across the state, is to list primary residence or primary businesses or uses, and you try to, when someone brings you something, to match it to something similar and go by that as a guideline for what is and isn't allowed. And so bed and breakfast was the best that we could come up with for that situation. It's not a hotel, it's not open 24/7 constantly, it's just different. It's more of a bed and breakfast situation. And so I really agree that that's probably more along the lines of what happened. A residence was purchased, we found out about it later for whatever reason, and they had already made investments, and for whatever reason, we don't even know for sure timeline wise who was here as far as like in charge of planning and zoning. I mean, obviously I was here, but not necessarily. I don't know if we still had a planning and zoning director at that time. I honestly do not know. So at this point though, that's where we're at, is they're operating, and so at this point, to do anything with what's currently there, you would basically need to have, you have to address a established business and either rein them in somehow or, and I think to ask them at this point to make significant changes like that, one, if you ask them to come and go ahead and get that conditional use, you're going to be hard pressed to get a planning commission that denies them because they've been owned and operated. And I think the public outcry from those who are also invested in that business or profiting from that business would be large, though the surrounding property owners' concerns would be acknowledged. I don't think anyone would deny the concerns that have come up. But I think it would be a challenge to address it at this point as far in as they've been. I mean, I don't know how many years they've been in operation. And really the way to address it is from here moving forward and encouraging those who do have concerns to make a complaint. And it may just be a visit that happens from law enforcement. or from staff.
Or from administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think initially that's what would need to happen, is just to have a conversation of, hey, here's where we're at, and, these are the concerns that have been raised. Let's see if we can do some things that would make it better for you, because you won't be getting the complaints from your neighbors, and two, better for the neighbors. So I really feel like that is where we're at, and the best way to approach it at this point. We can't go back and change and fix anything that's been done so far, but maybe we can improve on things moving forward. And, you know, say someone else, I mentioned this to Stacy, say there was another company that came in by chance and wanted to do something similar in town, moving forward, go ahead and address the issue up front and make them get a conditional use, because two wrongs don't make a right. So this may not have gone together exactly how it should have, but we don't have to do that twice. So that's where I'm at.
You know, I don't know that when they purchased that house, or they put that first initial house in, that this was their
Plan.
whole intention,
Well, the initial
I
house was
think-
not put in by them.
okay?
The initial house was put in by a developer out of Wichita, who
Okay.
immediately put it on the market.
So when they purchased that house then, I
Mhm.
don't know that the scale that they're on now
Right.
was their intention.
Exactly.
You know, now,
Yeah.
one other question I have is, have you had any other residents in the area, any response from them in the past? Yeah, okay,
Yearly.
okay.
About the cars or about the people?
We've had complaints on, and jump in here, Stacy,
Yeah.
dogs, whether it was when they had the dogs themselves
Right,
originally, or like, the people who are staying in the homes bringing their dogs. Sometimes, dogs end up staying there, and they can. So many dogs for so many days, that's totally legal, but the barking, we've had complaints of the loudness of the partying and the hours at which it's happening. Parking issues
Yeah. Parking and traffic.
has been the main complaint.
Yeah.
We kind of addressed the dog issue. That actually came through law enforcement, it was addressed. There was a court case on it. The owner and the manager were brought in, and went through a court case on the dogs. So that kind of was addressed. The dogs kennels that were originally there were moved out. That's kind of how the dog kennels outside of town happened. But then
how long ago was that?
Oh, I'd have to look. It's been several years ago.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is, I think that the manager that they have now is very understanding of this situation, and he wants to make it to where it works
Mhm.
for everybody.
He and I've had conversations.
Yeah, and I think that if you sat down with him and said, this is what we need to do, or,
Yeah.
you know, and the next question I have, so whatever we do there, does that also apply on East Grant, where they have numerous?
We were talking about that.
And
We
they
were
have,
talking
they
about
have done
that.
some improvements to those apartments, even though they don't own them.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah.
And I know parking is an issue there for the other residents that live in that area.
Yeah. And I have had conversations both with Cutter and with Jason Johnson
Okay?
over the years, about people's concerns,
Mhm.
because they have had to come in to get some permits for some of the things that they've done, or they've called and asked questions. Do we need a permit? Sometimes it's a little after the fact. We've talked about that you need to be calling before you do it, or before you spend the money to do something, and then I have to tell you, you can't do that.
I've heard about that, so.
So, we've had conversations, and they were pretty pleasant ones. I think we're on the same page as far as, what they can continue to do as far as any further development over here on the Walnut Street and South Grove Street properties. The only conversations that have happened really about Branch Street have been, about the use of sheds being put in. There was concern that they were going to be enclosed kennels, from neighboring property owners, because that's what they were told by the people doing the work. And so we had to have a second conversation about dog kennels and how many you can have at each property. And, so we've had plenty of conversations, and Cutter's really good about coming in and talking to me,
Yeah.
so.
Well, he came and talked to me after the first meeting, he wanted to know, what can we do?
Mm.
So I said, well, that you guys were working on it, and then you were gonna find out some more information, then we go from there.
Yeah.
I might make just a couple observations. One, again, in your building code, you're never gonna be able to accommodate each specific business. You do your best to kind of get your buckets and then place them into those buckets as, you know, as logically as you can. And I agree, I think bed and breakfast is the most appropriate for this type of operation. It seems to, I mean, I know at times they're actually rented out as Airbnbs, which stands for Air Beds and Bed and Breakfast. So I think that's appropriate. Our codes do have specific requirements for operating bed and breakfasts in residential areas. If it's in our code, we need to do our best to try and stick to that as much as possible, or we need to adjust our code if we're not gonna be enforcing that. What I'll say is, those businesses are absolutely permitted in residential areas. There are a couple hoops that need to be jumped through. And actually, I think that's appropriate. I kinda like it the way it is, and I just think we might need to go through those hoops and address it. I mean, you would need a conditional use permit, and I agree. I mean, that's a process. They'll apply for the conditional use, go through the planning commission, go through that process. But that process is important because it gives the residents of the area a chance to voice their concerns and do things like that. Now, I agree, the chances of an existing business being denied that conditional use when it's been in operation for 10 years already is low, but I still think it's important to kind of stick with that. And again, I'm not looking to shut any meetings down, just, you know, that's the way that we give our residents a say. Now, there are some other requirements that are probably gonna be harder or more expensive for them to meet, such as the off-street parking, which again would probably alleviate quite a few concerns, but it's also probably something that's impossible for a lot of the existing locations to abide by. And then the other requirement is just a, you know, narrative, you know, site plan plus this is how the property is going to be used. That's a pretty low bar. But our code says it, and if we want to keep our code the way it is, I mean, that's what our code says, that's what we need to do. And we need to do it the same for everybody. It doesn't matter who owns the property, where it is. That's what the code says. We enforce it that way. If we don't like what it says, we change it.
I will say they, have put in off-street parking, over on Walnut. Creating parking lots in residential neighborhoods is also not,
Yeah.
So the problem is the number of beds they have compared to our code, general code reference for number of required off-street parking spaces. They haven't, right now it's just a vacant lot and they park on it. So, is it really a parking lot? That's what it's being used for. The other problem has been because of the seasons they operate in. If it snows, that lot is a mud pit. They've gone in and tried to do some leveling this year to help with that, but there's no solid surface to it, which is not encouraged in the residential zone to create a parking lot. Other than, and I think this would be part of the conditional use, that they would need to make those arrangements when they get that conditional use. So if someone new was coming in and they applied for conditional use, they need to account for that many off-street parking and put in their plan that they want to put a parking lot that accommodates that. That way the neighborhood's aware and it's part of the conditional use. But you don't just come in and plop a parking lot. So, at that point it can be approved through a conditional use to put in a parking lot. That absolutely could happen.
Because the parking standards are for bed and breakfast is 1 space per 2 beds unless special requirements are imposed in conjunction with the conditional use.
1 space per 2 beds.
It's kind of like at a house. You're required to have, what is it, 2 off-street parking spaces? I can't remember
I
now.
think that's correct.
For a house. And so they're looking at it as, you probably have 3 beds, 4 bedrooms, so you need a couple of parking spaces per house. And that's just like a church parking lot. You get a conditional use. You can do a church in a residential neighborhood, but they need a conditional use, and it includes parking that's adequate for the number of people you have. It's just part of the plan review process. So, I think there's some things that if they would, that's gonna be messy. But if they had to go through go ahead and come back and get a conditional use permit, that's something we can talk about and get approved, and maybe suggest that they put some type of material over there that would allow them to utilize it even when it's wet, and get some of that parking off of the street. The only other thing I can see that could be a problem with that is, some of their vehicles are not just a vehicle, it's a vehicle with a trailer. So that takes up a whole lot more space than just a single vehicle. So that will eat up parking very quickly when you start putting trailers in it. So it's just something we can talk through and try to come up with a plan, if they're willing to have that conversation. But yeah, if you guys require them to backtrack and go back and get and you can absolutely, put that out there for us to do that.
These folks are 30 days out from this business starting.
We wouldn't, I would say it would be something that we try to get in place for the next season.
That sounds like.
But have the conversation, because we have to advertise a conditional use in the paper and do the advertising to the neighbors within 200 feet of the property. So that's gonna be a large area since they own a lot. And if we're talking about, you guys would have to give direction about the Grant Street houses, because that's a whole lot more.
There you go.
I mean, my 2 cents are, if they're used in this capacity and we start enforcing this requirement, we need to enforce it universally for all properties,
So
not just pick and choose.
So now do you bring the owners of those apartments in on this?
They
too?
would have to be the applicant.
Yes.
They would have to be the applicant.
Yep.
That would allow us to have conversations and set some parameters about maybe the parking lot over there, getting them to do maybe some surfacing that would allow them to use it more often.
And is the zoning and everything intact for the building of Brian Guppenberger's that they use?
They went and got a
They're
conditional
good.
use.
They have a conditional.
They got a conditional use because they came and talked to us before they purchased anything. And
Okay.
we walked through what they would need to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the ideal is that they want to expand even in their existing area, they're gonna have to come and get conditional use. If they wanna buy another lot that they don't currently own and put something.
And use it for that. Yeah.
I think minimum that staff recommendation is moving forward, that any potential expansion would need to come for conditional use. Doing a retroactive conditional use is another thing that we can't address if that's the governing body's desire to do that. But I think our recommendation is definitely, at least moving forward, that a conditional use process would need to happen.
And we can still have the conversations about some of the other stuff. Even if you don't tell us to go back and get a conditional use
Right.
on
We can
the
still-
current properties, we can still have those conversations.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hate to go back and it sounds to me like I'm a law enforcement officer. I've seen this guy go flying through town and a week later I stop him.
For what he did, yeah,
It's after the fact,
yeah.
But
I think we have a conversation with them, like
Yeah.
what you're talking about, and we get them to work with us as much as possible to take care of this situation, and then we know in the future what we can and we cannot do.
And again, like Stacy said, there's multiple things that are concerns that the public, various neighbors, not even just immediate neighbors, but people within the community have voiced concern over traffic, noise, whatever, that some of those things, if people would report them when they're happening, or even after the fact, it's something that can be addressed. But if we don't know about it for
We don't know.
weeks, months later, then it's kind of hard to go back and slack, other than to say, hey, we've been having some complaints, could you try to, but it would be nice if people have a concern or something's happening, go ahead and make a phone call, and it probably will be a very nice conversation, just, hey, did you guys,
And Christie, in the same breath, do they even know that that stuff is happening?
Yes.
There's some of
Yes.
that they don't even know is going on.
Yeah, they've been addressed multiple
No,
times.
that's not what I meant. I meant that there is stuff that has happened that their manager may not know about.
Oh, you mean like at the other places?
Yeah.
Like
Where
if
you
there was
get
a
a complaint
noise
down
problem
here, he
over
may
here.
not even know about what you're talking about.
That's what I mean. If we
Yeah.
know about it, we can address that conversation. But I know that there have been things that have happened that have been addressed to them. And sometimes there's been a good response, and sometimes there has not been a good response from the managers.
Sometimes
Various
I'll go
managers.
talk to my
Yeah.
council member.
I believe
Heard that.
this gentleman here is a little different than some of the past, so. But I also have to look at things, and then this is not something you can really base a decision on, but they do bring a lot of money into our community. And that's why I hate to go back after the fact.
Well,
And that, I know that is probably not a deciding factor, but we have to keep that in mind also.
and again, I think, my point would be, again, not looking to shut these businesses down. And it does sound like the current managers, owners, operators are open to, well, what can they do to address some of these concerns? And I just think this is an opportunity to work with them and just seeing how we can work together to maybe make everyone as happy as possible.
I would like to start with the conversation.
Perhaps it's the only way that you're gonna get this satisfied to where we're not gonna tick them off to where they pull up and leave out of town. Or we're gonna be satisfied and the residents gonna be, because you know, we're down in Walnut during November, you know. November, December, skip.
January.
Yeah, in January, you know, but since it's happened, we didn't know about it, they didn't know about it. A conversation, I think, is the best way of going about it to where everybody's.
Let's get started addressing these things.
That's exactly right. If you don't know it, you can't do anything about it. And that's kind of the situation I feel like we're in. We knew that he was gonna move to town. You know, he might have only used one bed, or he might have only got one house and then decided that, oh,
this is
hey,
working.
we got a hot spot
Here
here.
we are.
And now we've got 7, you know, but it might have been a thing that he didn't know. So I think we need to give him a benefit of the doubt and correct it from here.
I think I agree with Matt. It spelled out how we're supposed to do it. It was some oversight on the timing of it, whether it was the cities or theirs or the combination. But you kind of set a precedence if you go away from an ordinance that's written.
Oh, absolutely.
We can certainly have a conversation with them about what the codes say and see what we can get done that way too. Whether you decide to ask us to call for a conditional use or not. And we can have that conversation and say, there's probably some ways we can do this better. You may not like the rule, but here's why we have it. So,
Yeah, I think it's important that they know that we could make things tougher if we could.
Yeah.
And not to threaten, but just, I think that they're pretty motivated to make sure that it works, because
It's a big business.
it'll be interesting, I mean, it'll be good to see their willingness to cooperate this season. And then, like I said, I think the main concern that we needed to address is if they continue to expand, what are we gonna do?
Right,
And I think
right.
that conditional use at least addresses that going forward.
And just as far as the development code itself, council see anything they would like to change there? Are they pretty happy with how that's written? My 2 cents is I think those are fairly reasonable, straightforward requirements, and I would tend to want to keep those in there. Hearing no suggestions for changes? Happy with that as written? Okay. Well, I guess for summary, sounds like the direction is maybe staff work with some of the operators of these, just see, you know, address some of the concerns that have been raised by area residents, see how we can work with them, maybe to make sure those are addressed and, you know, they're able to operate their businesses smoothly, but also make life easy and pleasurable for their neighbors.
and honestly, some of those things may actually benefit them. It may actually be helpful to them, whether they realize it or not. If there's some I don't know, I wanna say organization to the we're not asking them to do anything major going into season. But if we could work on these things and make it better, it'll make their lives better too. I mean, if I was a business owner, I wouldn't want my neighbors, you know, to be upset with me. I'd be wanting to try to work with them. So I think it will benefit them as well, so.
Council, any further discussion on this topic? Staff need any further direction?
I don't think so.
All right, we will move along to our next and final item of business tonight, and that is a request for proposals for another moderate income housing grant.
Last week, KHRC announced the opening of a new round of funding for the MIH program, and that application deadline is November 2nd. Previously, earlier in the year, we talked about that we would continue to apply, and this time do an RFP process to seek developers that were interested. This is similar to what the county did for their RFP or MIH process, and thanks to Matt for sharing the RFP that they did. I modified that for the city's use, and I have included a draft of that here in the proposal, or in the agenda packet for you. So basically, we would publish it and seek proposals from developers of basically what would you build if you were to get this grant to partner with the city. This is a fairly quick application deadline, so I've put a proposed timeline of how this process could work. Should you approve the RFP tonight for publication, I would publish it on the city's website and then start to reach out to some local developers to let them know that we're seeking proposals, and that we would get it published in the Tri-County Tribune newspaper. That would be on the 17th due to their publication deadlines. And then I would put the deadline for submission of proposals from the RFP to be October 31st at 5 p.m. That way those could be considered by the governing body on November 4th. Someone selected, and then we would have some time to work with them on that final grant application to have it submitted by the 22nd. So a pretty quick turnaround to hopefully get someone to partner with. I will say, this is part of my administrator report, but I'll just say it now ahead of time. We're not moving around enough, I guess. The Gumpenberger duplexes on Bay Street are completed, and they're working on tenants right now, contacting those to start leasing them out, and I'm working on closing out that grant process. We'll have the 5-year compliance moving forward. That'll be an annual submission to KHRC, but those are completed. So by the time we would submit a grant application, hopefully we're closed out on this current project. In previous conversations I've had with KHRC, and I've asked, you know, is it looked on less favorably to award someone who just came off a project? Because in my opinion, I would think it would be that, you know, you just gave some money here, we're gonna give some money somewhere else. And they said, yes, but, of course, yes, but it also looks good with, you've had successful projects. We know you know what you're doing. This would be our second one now that we've completed. So we do have a track record of success, and so I think that is looked upon well. But with that being said, I don't necessarily think we're a shoo-in to get a grant this round. But I also don't want to not apply just because of that, because you never know. So I think it's always worth a shot to go ahead and throw our hat in the ring and see what happens. And say we weren't awarded this time, we could go back to the next round, and if you wanted to move forward with the same developer. So I'll leave that for your discussion and entertain any questions.
I think it's a good program. It's gotten the city a decent amount of new housing in the last 5 to 10 years, and even if we don't have a great shot, because we have been awarded recently, if you don't apply, you're not going to get it, and it's not a whole lot of, I mean, it's a pretty low bar just to go ahead and go through the process, submit an application, and if nothing else, even if we don't get it this round, you know, work the bugs out of the RFP process, which is new for us, and, you know, just give us maybe a leg up and a foot in the door for future rounds if and when we apply again. So I'm all for it. There's like little to no downside to doing it.
You if nothing else, they see our name one more time, you know?
Oh, it's them again.
Yeah,
Keeps us on our mailing
so,
list.
they're persistent.
Yep.
We need a motion for that.
I'd say just a motion to approve the request for proposal for moderate income housing project proposals.
I'd make that motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve releasing an RFP for the moderate income housing program. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right, that takes,
I'll get it out in the world.
and we'll probably have it back on our plate in about a month.
And if you know of any builder, developer that might be interested, please let me know. I kind of know the ones in the county to reach out to, but if there's somebody else that maybe you've heard in the past has mentioned they would be interested in partnering with the city, please let me know, and that way I can get them the information.
All right, we'll move on to city staff reports. Stacy?
Included in your packet is the monthly police department report from Chief Davis. We are working to finalize the lead service line inventory. I'm working with PEC. We've been working with them to complete that, to get that sent to KDHE by the October 16th deadline. They're supposed to send me a final draft of the spreadsheet this week to look over before sending that in. I haven't got that yet, so I can't really tell you a percentage of what our responses were as far as on the private side, but we were able to, our staff go out and identify a lot of the public line service material. PEC sent us maps several times where there were holes, dots, and I sent the guys out with maps and went out to identify a lot of locations. So I feel like we had a pretty good response, and we're in a good spot on that. There will be more follow-up to come after those inventories are submitted. I know KDHE is requiring notification to residents if lead service lines were found. As of now, I don't know that we have any that have been identified, so we may not have to do that, but there will continue to be some hoops to jump through as far as that's concerned. Last week, USDA announced the PACE grant awards, and the KPP Energy Solar project that we've talked about for about a year and a half was on the list. And it's the only one in Kansas. There, I believe, were 7 other awards across the country, and this project was one of them. And this will be to construct the solar generation 1 megawatt at the business park that we have previously discussed and approved an easement for in the past. So KPP is working with USDA Rural Development, the state director, on what a groundbreaking ceremony might look like and where that might be located in one of the 7 member cities. So stay tuned for more information about that. As I mentioned, the Bay Street duplexes are move-in ready, and so we're working on closing that out. On the table in front of you, you'll see an invitation to the ribbon cutting and lunch for the Cuyahoga County Memorial Hospital mobile clinic that they have just purchased. That is Saturday, October 12th at 11 a.m. You may have already seen it. It's an RV that's been out by the hospital. Christy and I got to see the inside of it one day. They came down Main Street, and it's pretty nice in there. So I encourage you, if you're around Saturday, to go check that out. I've also included in my report an invitation from Great Plains Development, who is our Southwest Kansas Economic Development Corporation that helps cities and communities in the area with economic development grant efforts. They are doing an annual meeting via Zoom. They started doing that around COVID instead of an in-person kind of dinner situation. So you'll see that's Thursday, October 24th at 3:30. If you would like to join that Zoom meeting. Last Thursday and Friday was the KPP annual conference in Wichita. Mick, Kale, and I attended. They had some great speakers, and a couple of the sessions were specifically to learn more about solar and this project coming up, some of the particulars, and answering questions. KPP will be holding its annual rate forum on November 1st, and then the annual membership meeting on December 13th. So those are kind of the next 2 big meetings they're holding. I will be starting to work with Rhonda Fernandez on our annual employee health benefits renewal. I reached out to Blue Cross today, and we should be expecting our renewal packet here within the next week to 10 days. So Rhonda and I'll be looking at that and talking about what our options are for, to bring to you for employee benefits. And then in honor of Public Power Week, I would just like to recognize all of our employees. I think we have a great team, and I'm proud to be a part of it and the hard work that everybody puts forth every day for our community. That's all I have.
Questions for Stacy? Hearing none, do we have any governing body comments tonight? Hearing none of those, that brings us to the end of our agenda tonight, so we will adjourn the meeting. Thanks for your time, everybody.